Hello. This is going to be the first in a new series here at Seven Sisters. So, hello again. I think I have to restart. We're starting a new initiative here at Seven Sisters, and we're calling it Office Hours. And each week, we're going to have a dialogue among the three of us via video on YouTube. And each of us will just post a video of about 5 minutes talking about a challenge or an idea or any thoughts that we're having that week that are related to our work as interpreters, our work as interpreter trainers, instructors, teachers, whatever you want to call us, educators. And then it'll just be an exchange. It'll be a dialogue with each other. And once Liz and Laura, once the other two people respond, it will not always be led by me. Once the other two people respond, then we'll stitch together and have a video that has our three thoughts, the responses to it. And we might have a resource that we're recommending or that we're inspired by and that we're talking about, and we might not. So this week, I'm going to, and I just realized, oh, there it is. Okay. I only have 3 minutes and a half left. This week, I'm going to talk about mindfulness, one of my favorite topics, namely insight meditation and its connection to mindfulness and Buddhism, and how it is connected to Western psychology and the idea of mental health. And more specifically, the idea of pain, suffering, and grief. We're going through some very challenging times right now, pretty much everyone to a more or lesser degree. And this is the case always, of course. Of course, there's always suffering. There's always pain. And how we deal with it says a lot about how it will affect us. So in Buddhism, they talk about the difference between pain and suffering, what happens to you and what you do with that. And you can control your suffering. You can't control your pain. I'm inspired this week by this book, The Trauma of Everyday Life. It's by Mark Epstein. He is a psychiatrist, and he also is a Buddhist. And he has a lot of great books and podcast interviews and blog entries where he talks about the connection between Buddhism and Western psychology. And I just find it really interesting. And I think it's really relevant to us as interpreters and all the stresses that we deal with, either because of our anxiety with the work that we do, and also with the stories that we witness as interpreters, and the suffering that can come from witnessing and voicing pain. Stories that people tell and that we tell them in first person. We voice those stories and all that pain, and sometimes can suffer as well. Known formally as vicarious trauma or secondary trauma. And in the little time that I have, I just wanted to mention some of what inspired me to talk about this today here in this book. Epstein talks about suffering and how it's very important to acknowledge suffering and to talk about it. And this is something that we see it in Western psychology and we see it in Buddhism. So the idea of not avoiding things. The only way to work through something is to work through it. You can't avoid it. You can't run away from it. You can't try to go over or under it. You have to work through it. And the importance of acknowledging suffering. He says that the most important thing we can do about suffering is to acknowledge it. My favorite quote right now in this book is about grief and how it's not static. Grief turns over and over. It is vibrant, surprising, and alive, just as we are. So grief is vibrant, surprising, and alive, just as we are. Grief is going to be different for each of us. Grief is not going to have a time to end necessarily. And there's no one strategy to deal with it, and there's no one way that someone goes through it. He talks about how he doesn't even really like thinking of grief in the 5 traditional stages, because not everyone goes through it that way. So I am running out of time. This is inspiring me for me as a teacher and as an interpreter, because we do deal with a lot of stress, and we have to guide our students through such stress and remember them to be present for the moment. Remember them not to focus on all the what ifs, but just to be present for the moment. And I think it's connected to this idea that grief is different for each of us. And again, that grief is not the same. It's not the same for me, and it's not the same for me, the me that I was a week or a year ago. So, Liz and Laura, I want to see what you have to say about this. This is actually the second video I make on this because I made it on the wrong channel. So we'll see how this goes. And if you have any thoughts, you can leave them here as well.